well, hopefully, yeah, there's a big pause at the beginning of this video. Okay, that's fine. All right, let's get to OJ. If the speed is already correct, do not worry. Do not worry. There we go. I wonder what we're going to do today. Oh, same thing we did yesterday. Same questions, same people.
Number 1133. That's one. Now, Mr. Sims, in the PCR amplification process, whether you're using the DQ alpha system, the polymarker system, or the D1S80 system, in terms of basic principles, would it be fair to say that what is happening is one is starting with a certain amount of genetic material?
Yes.
And then what happens is that in the PCR amplification process itself, there is what are known as cycles.
Yes.
Could you explain that for us, how that works? And how a piece of starting material is amplified up into many larger fragments. Many more fragments.
More fragments, right, not larger. This is the PCR process, and I won't go into great detail with this, but what you're doing is you're starting with a certain amount of what we call template DNA. In other words, that's the DNA that you extracted from the stain. And then you are doing what is called amplifying a particular segment of that DNA, a very small, relatively small portion of that DNA. And you're using that then to that repetitive, or you're making additional copies of a particular area, then you're making copies from copies and copies from copies and so on and so on. And that's why you see what we call this exponential expansion of the number of fragments that you get.
Now, let us assume that the starting material here, all right, contains DNA for, let's pick the DQ alpha system, all right?
Okay.
And in the DQ alpha system, you have a series of different alleles.
Yes.
And they're about how many base pairs long for the most part?
About 240 base pairs, the area of interest.
Let's assume for purposes of this that in this starting material, we're talking about DNA that has the genotype 1.3 for the DQ alpha system.
Okay.
So in other words, would it be fair to say that when you begin making the copies from that starting material, that with each different cycle, you're producing more and more fragments that are about, what, 269 base pairs long?
About 240.
240 base pairs long that are little copies of that 1.3 allele.
Yes.
And as the cycles go on, you're producing, what's this number at the end after 32 cycles?
It looks like you've got 4,290,000,000 fragments.
Fragments. 290 million fragments of that 1.3 allele.
Yes.
That's 240
Base pairs long. Yes.
And when you do that amplification with one of these little microfuge tubes, after you put it in that thermocycler machine, you're going to get inside that tube 4,290,000,000 fragments of 1.3.
Well, again, it depends on your starting material, but that's the idea. That's proper.
And a single amplification could contain something on the order of 1 trillion copies of an amplified target sequence.
I don't think at our levels that we get up to 1 trillion copies. I think maybe 1 billion is sort of the neighborhood.
1 billion copies. When we talk about the amplified target sequence here, we're talking about that 1.3.
That's correct.
And would you agree that that is a staggering number of molecules?
Well, no, it's not really a staggering number of molecules. I mean, you look at the air, think how many molecules are in the air and that sort of thing. It's not a staggering number of molecules, it's just a large number.
Pretty large number, right?
But not in terms of molecules.
Well, it's enough to cover many square miles of land. If you just took them out of the tube and spread them out.
maybe in a string or something like that. I suppose there could be something like that, yes.
And with the contents of that reaction, with these 4,290,000,000 fragments, it certainly, if it got out of that tube, could cover a lot of square footage in a laboratory.
Yes, there could be some significant number of copies. That's true.
And in a DNA laboratory, when you're doing these PCR tests, you are amplifying up in the tubes these billions of fragments again and again and again.
Well, for example, if you did several samples, yes, each tube would contain that large number of fragments, yes.
And if some of these fragments, are these fragments, one of these fragments, is it visible to the naked eye?
Yes, it would be.
One of those fragments?
Yes.
How small would it be?
You couldn't see it. Yeah, you couldn't see it. I mean, it's extremely tiny. We're talking about things on the atomic, well, it's not an atom, obviously, it's several atoms, but you can't see it.
I misspoke when I said it's visible to the naked eye. You're talking about seeing it under a microscope?
No, you couldn't see that under a microscope.
All right, so you couldn't see it.
No, you couldn't see it.
All right. With that not being able to see, Your Honor, I think before I move on to the next aspect of it, this might be good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a brief 10-minute recess. Please remember all my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. Don't form any opinions about the case. Don't allow anybody to communicate with you. Don't perform any deliberations until the matter has been submitted to you. We'll stand in recess for 10 minutes.
Is it just me, or does that jerk attorney always take a 10-minute break when I start my stream?
My proposal is just to show him that has the numbers he testified to, and introduce it and move on.
Mr. Harmon?
The one that jumps out as being grossly perverted is 52. And Robin Cotton, as I recall, said 25 to 60. So,
This is just his answers to my hypothetical, based on his quotations.
remember my better late than never yesterday, Your Honor. That hypothetical was based on a lot of things that have no resemblance to reality, including 52. I mean, that is the state of the record with respect to Cellmark. So, and that points out why these argumentative distortions of what's been presented here, they may be great for Mr. Cochran's closing argument, but even at that point, I think you'd look at them with a dim view. And I hope you would, anyway.
This is just a straightforward, clear, simple graphic of what the testimony was yesterday, based on
Our
the hypothetical.
computer's wonderful.
They are.
All right, I'll overrule the previous objections. However, I anticipate 5 or 6 rather pointed questions from Mr. Harmon regarding the underlying assumptions.
I did too.
Okay, let's proceed. Have the jury, please.
Your Honor, could I just comment? If you have those questions about the legitimacy of the assumptions, then why don't you defer on letting the jury see this rather than seeing it, and then let me straighten it out next Wednesday or Thursday. I thought we were keeping
What
them
day,
from being.
Josh?
What
What
looking
day?
at all of this,
Give me
the
a
issue
number.
is whether or not it would be
Not
misleading.
52 billion.
Under the hypothetical that Mr. Scheck, and with his assumptions, it was an appropriate hypothetical question. However, I suspect that you will be able to come back and counter some of those assumptions. And I have already instructed the jury regarding the assumptions made in hypothetical questions. Let's proceed.
Could you instruct them again, then, Your Honor, before we actually show them a manifestation of
I'm not going to pinpoint instructions for either party at any particular time.
Josh, answer my question. What day? What day, Josh? Give me a day. Don't make me FBI search you online. I will. I need to know.
Mr. Sims, why don't you go ahead and take your seat. All right, let the record reflect that we have been rejoined now by all the members of our jury panel. Mr. Sims is again on the witness stand, and Mr. Scheck, you may continue with your cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Sims, to move back to our discussion of PCR carryover
I already have it.
contamination. Now, referring you again to the chart that's 1133. Now, these 4,290,000,000 fragments that are produced by an amplification is the term that is sometimes used to describe a single one of those fragments, an amplicon fragment.
Yes, I've seen that term in the literature.
And sometimes it's just referred to as an amplicon.
Yes.
And under the discussion we were having of this 32 cycles of one fragment, we were assuming it was the starting material
Excuse
was...
me, Mr. Scheck.
Sorry?
Excuse me, just a second. All right, proceed.
We were assuming the starting material here was a 1.3, 1.3.
Okay.
And so that would mean that the 4,290,000,000 amplicon fragments were these 1.3, 1.3 fragments from the DQ alpha system.
Yes.
And just as we broke, you indicated to us that one of those fragments is invisible.
Yes.
And if a number of these invisible fragments were to get from one of these tubes into another tube, that could cause what's known as PCR carryover contamination.
Objection vague as to a number.
Oh, well,
Well, again, it would depend on the number.
How many of these amplicon fragments, these 1.3 fragments, would it take to, when it transferred to another tube where it shouldn't be, to create one of those little 1.3 dots on a DQ alpha strip?
Well, it's not just to create the dot, it's actually to get a typable result. Is that what you mean? To get a typable result, we'd need about 100 of them, something like that.
100.
100, yes.
Only 100 out of those 4,290,000,000 fragments being transferred to another tube would cause a 1.3 contaminant on a strip.
Yes.
And have you ever heard the term exquisite sensitivity applied to the PCR technique?
Yes, I have.
And by exquisite sensitivity, it is meant that the ability of the PCR process to amplify up very small amounts of starting material means that it is a very sensitive form of testing.
Yes, it is.
And by sensitivity, we're talking about the ability to detect small amounts of, in this case, DNA.
Yes.
If one takes one of those microfuge tubes with the top and pops it up and gets a small aerosol, gets on a glove, gets on the rim of another tube, and then gets into a second tube, and only 100 of those fragments gets into that second tube, that can cause a PCR carryover contamination, which would create one of those typable 1.3 dots lighting up on a strip.
Well, no, that by itself wouldn't cause that. The way you phrase that, that's not what you're talking about.
It gets into the tube, and then you amplify it up, and then you see the dot on the strip.
In other words, if some of that amplified product, that number of copies we talked about, got back into another tube, and then that got amplified, then that's correct, yes. But you have to amplify what you got in the tube. That's right.
Now, because these amplified products, it only takes 100 of them, I think you said,
Yes,
to create a contaminant typing result.
yes,
PCR laboratories, whether doing forensic typing or typing for clinical medicine, have to be very, very concerned about carryover contamination.
you have to be very concerned about that, yes.
You have to take very strict precautions to make sure that amplified product, these fragments, are not accidentally spread around.
You have to take strict precautions, yes.
And you need to take strict precautions because only 100 of these invisible fragments can cause that contaminant.
Yes, in other words, 100 of those fragments all landing in the same place, the same tube as you mentioned, yes.
Now, in your amplified fragments, these invisible amplified fragments can get on people's shoes.
I suppose they could if there was some on the floor, for example, and you stepped in it.
and you could carry them to another section of the laboratory if one isn't careful.
Yes, I suppose that could happen.
And you can get on clothing.
Yes.
And if you carry that to another part of the laboratory, then touch your clothing and put your hand down on a surface that can spread the amplicons.
Yes, that could spread them out, yes.
And then that spread of the amplicons can somehow get on an analyst's hands or clothing and then start getting into reagents.
It's somewhat of a circuitous route, but I suppose theoretically all that could happen.
Well, isn't that, in your understanding of the literature in this area, more than a theoretical problem?
Well, most of the concern has come about, for example, in the way instrumentation such as pipettes are used or that sort of thing, but that is part of the issue, is you want to isolate the PCR product. There's no doubt about that.
No doubt about it.
No doubt about that.
And that's why in your laboratories, withdrawn. Now, once one gets PCR carryover contamination in a laboratory, it is hard to pinpoint exactly where it came from.
In other words, if one saw a large amount of it, in other words, a large number of samples that were contaminated, is that what you're saying? Yes, it could be difficult to isolate that.
And in the literature on PCR typing, there has been much written about measures that could be taken in laboratories to prevent carryover or amplicon contamination, as it's called.
Yes.
One precaution that has been suggested is the use of an enzyme known as UNG.
Yes.
Actually, I think it stands for, it's maybe more information than we need, uracil N-glycolase.
Want to spell that?
Sure.
Or is it glycosylase, maybe?
Uracil, U-R-A-C-I-L, new word, capital N dash G-L-Y-C-O-L-A-S-E. Yes?
I believe that's right, yes.
Typically, otherwise known as UNG.
Um,
And this is an enzyme that can be put into the PCR process that can prevent.
No, John. No, it's Labor Day. You're not going in. Tell them that. Tell them Kathy said.
It can be used to prevent amplification of carryover amplicons from a previous amplification run.
Yes, that's one approach that was proposed some time back. Nobody's adopted it in forensic use because we haven't found the need for it.
Nobody in the forensic laboratories has adopted it.
That's correct.
But in PCR typing for purposes of clinical diagnosis, this is a widely used technique, isn't it?
Objections, irrelevant, cause for speculation.
How the hell would
Do
he
you
know?
know if UNG is used in clinical laboratories as a precaution against PCR carryover contamination?
Objection, cause for hearsay, speculation.
Sustained.
Are you familiar with the section
No,
concerning
he's
PCR
not.
carryover contamination in the NRC report?
Objections, irrelevant.
Call your attention to page 67.
Irrelevant.
Are you familiar with that?
I've read it.
What do you mean
Do
overruled?
you rely upon the recommended, on that section of the,
Objection.
rephrase the question. Do you rely on the section of the NRC report that discusses PCR carryover contamination in formulating your opinions
Your Honor, I
about
object.
PCR
That's hearsay
typing?
in the form of that question, Your Honor.
Well, counsel, if you're talking at the same time, I can't hear the question, I can't hear the objection at the same time. Restate the question.
Do you rely on the section of the National Academy of Sciences report concerning PCR carryover contamination?
No.
Proceed.
Is Dr. George Sensabaugh one of the authors of this NRC report?
Say I don't know. Say I don't know.
Yes, I believe he was one of the authors of the report.
Is that the same Dr. George Sensabaugh that was the author of those articles, or a number of the articles that Mr. Harmon referred you to on direct examination?
Yes.
I'm going to
Now-
find Joshua. I'll be right back.
So you don't use UNG as a precaution against PCR carryover contamination in your laboratory.
That's correct. We found no need for it.
Now, ultraviolet light can be used to as a precaution against PCR carryover contamination.
Yes.
Literally, if you expose the DNA to ultraviolet light, it does something that they call cross-link it.
Yes, you get cross-linking, thymine, dimers, that sort of thing.
And in simple terms, what that means is if you expose the amplicons to ultraviolet light, you will sort of deactivate them to the point where they can't be amplified up as carryover contamination.
That's the basic idea, yes.
And so ultraviolet light can be used as a way of as a precaution against PCR carryover contamination getting on surfaces.
Yes.
And I think you indicated that when you take notes in your forensic typing, you do it as the work is performed.
Yes.
So you would be there with your paper, your notes, the paper on which you make your notes, as you're performing some of these functions.
Yes.
And as a precaution, do you take the pages of your notes and put it in some machine to expose them to ultraviolet light?
Well, what I do is I take the pages that have been in the PCR room, that's our product room, I expose those in a device called a stratolinker, which it zaps them basically with this ultraviolet light, and then I do that both sides of the paper before I remove it from that room.
And the reason that you literally take the pieces of paper that you bring into that PCR product room, and then you put it in, what do you call it, a contraption?
The device is called a stratolinker.
Right. You put it in there, you expose both sides of the paper to the ultraviolet light, right?
Yes.
So that's to make sure that the paper that you're carrying out of that PCR product room doesn't contain any of these amplicons.
Yes.
That's
to.
I'm sorry.
Well, yes, that's to again expose it to the UV light. It's a protective device.
That's how careful one has to be.
Well, that's we are probably overboard on that matter, but we think
Well-
it's a good idea because that paper may have been, for example, on a lab bench in the PCR room.
When you say overboard, you're talking in terms of comparing forensic DNA laboratories, right? You're comparing yourself to other forensic DNA laboratories.
Yes, that's all I know about.
Right. You don't know very much about what clinical laboratories do in terms of trying to prevent PCR carryover contamination.
I don't know a great deal about that. That's correct.
And would it be fair to say that the PCR typing process has been used in clinical laboratories far longer than it has been in forensic laboratories?
No foundations, irrelevant.
Do you know the answer to that question?
No.
Proceed.
Is it fair to say that most of the forensic laboratories that you've been referring to for your knowledge are laboratories that are connected with law enforcement?
Yes.
So basically what's happening, I think you even described it on direct, is that law enforcement, police crime laboratories, have been taking a PCR technology that was first introduced in clinical medicine, the first application, and in research, and transferring it into the crime laboratory.
You're saying no foundation, speculation. Over.
Well, I don't know. You said first. I know Dr. Blake, who's a forensic analyst, was using this stuff in 1985 or 6. I mean, he was in the same building as the CETUS company that developed it. So I don't know that you can actually say that clinical medicine people were using it before Dr. Blake was.
Well-
I'm struggling with that one.
Well, you know Dr. Carey Mullis.
I don't know him personally.
You know who he is.
I know who he is.
He invented PCR technique.
Yes, I believe his name is on the patent along with some other people.
He won the Nobel Prize.
He won the Nobel Prize.
Now, in your laboratory, at the end of the PCR typing process, you go into something that you call a what room?
Product room.
Product room. And that's where these tubes are amplified up.
Yes, that's where the amplification and typing takes place.
And that's where you do your PCR product gel.
Yes.
And it's in your protocol that you never take PCR product out of that room.
Well, we never process it away from that room. That's correct. We would not do that.
And that's because of this danger of carryover contamination.
That's correct.
Every tool in that PCR product room is a dedicated tool.
Yes, it is.
You don't take a pin that you would use in that room out of the room, do you?
That's correct.
You don't take the lab coat out of that room.
That's correct.
You don't take any gloves out of that room.
That's correct.
You don't take any tubes out of that room.
That's correct.
And you would never, in your laboratory, take the PCR tubes out of that room, put it in a car, drive it for a mile, bring it into another laboratory, and then in another room in a laboratory, perform a PCR product gel? Would you?
No foundation, calls for speculation,
Mr.
so
Stanton,
relevant
phrase the question.
beyond the scope.
Would you ever take tubes out of your PCR product room and perform what's known as a PCR product gel in another room in your laboratory?
Objection, it's vague in terms of what another room is.
No, it would always be contained in the PCR product room because of the way our lab is set up.
And that's because it's a one-way workflow.
That's correct.
And that's what's recommended by, in forensic laboratories and any other laboratory that you know of that does PCR typing, that you should have a one-way workflow and the PCR product should not leave that last room.
That's the basic idea, yes. In other words, you work on a sample, you extract it, then you move into the PCR room for the final step.
And could you just tell the jury what a PCR product gel is?
A PCR product gel is another one of these mini gels I think Dr. Cotton may have referred to. It's sort of like a yield gel, but it just tells you whether or not you got PCR product out of your amplification. In other words, it evaluates whether or not this amplification process was a success. Because if it was a success, you'll see a band for the DNA size fragment we mentioned, about 240 base pairs on your gel.
And to perform a PCR product
All right.
gel,
Is it me, or is he asking questions sort of almost factual? Like he's right beside the line of what matters and what's true. What matters is what they did in that laboratory. What matters is if one of these strands did get into another tube when there's billions of the real stuff in that other tube, is that one strand gonna make a difference? I mean, I guess technically, in the weirdest situations, what Shek is saying might possibly be true, but it's just not. So he's like, this is the truth, the facts. He's like walking like over here. I guess that's their job, right? No, I got Duncan because I haven't had Duncan in a while. So I got Duncan instead today. I feel bad when I get Duncan because it's further away. So I leave a huge tip because they have to drive a little bit further. And I'm talking about 6 blocks further. So that was in my head. It's too far.
bottom line, you would be taking some tubes that contain these amplicon fragments. You would have to be using that. Be using amplified product.
Yes.
Mr. Sims, let's discuss the glove.
Okay.
And in preparation for that, I would ask you to turn to, I guess it's page 69 of your notes, while I search for one of the glove groups.
Okay, we're away from hypotheticals. We're really talking about an actual piece of evidence, guys. Here we go. Let's go. I wonder how they stayed quiet for so long. They're lawyers. That must be killing them.
Number 272A.
Hypothetically, maybe. That looks pretty solid. That looks like factuals.
Excuse me, counsel, we're missing the other board that goes with this.
Oh, I don't know.
Shut up, Judge.
Yes.
For my purposes now. But I wouldn't mind using it, but...
No, that was our agreement.
Oh, the two of them would always be done together. You're absolutely right, Ron. It's just a question of logistics, but I thank you.
Deal's a deal.
So I guess that means another...
Yes.
Easy.
It looks like he has pictures of the glove too, which means those are real questions coming up. Truth adjacent real questions. Hypothetically, if this glove had a sixth finger, let's say this glove had a sixth finger, and there was no blood on that sixth finger, how many fingers does Mr. Simpson have? Answer the question. True.
While we're doing that.
While we're doing that, you just have to put a board on an easel. Let's go. I'm excited. I want to hear what you're going to say about the glove.
Show Mr. Harmon some photographs too.
Mr. Harmon, flip it over. They're two-sided.
While they're searching for this board, I'll show the witness these photos.
Proceed.
Did not doctor, because he doesn't have his master's yet. Flip the first one over right away. Oh, is this two sides? Oh, but he didn't flip the second one over, which is two sides. They're stressing me out. It's like my kids looking for lunch. Looking for their lunchbox when it's right in front of them. Like, just lift your coat. Lift your coat. Lift it out.
Mr. Scheck.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you examine those photos?
Yes.
Any problems?
No.
Now, let's just, you began your examination of the glove on October 15th.
Yes, I believe yes, that's correct.
What I'd like to do with you now is just go over what you did and how long it took you to do it, to cut from the glove.
My stomach clenched there. I thought he was going to say you started on October 15th. Yes? Okay, hypothetically. Like I could hear the word hypothetically come out of his mouth and it didn't. I'm traumatized.
4 samples. I believe they are G1, G2, G3, and G4.
Well,
Okay?
Okay, but when you say cut, I mean, I'm also spending a lot of time documenting, photographing, and Dr. Blake is taking photographs too, so.
That's right.
It's not right to just say, how long did I take to cut?
No, I'm going
Okay.
to take you through it step by step,
Okay,
starting at page 69 of your notes.
okay,
On October 15th, at about 3:15, you began an examination of this glove, which you received on September 7th.
that's correct.
And you photographed it and you made a diagram.
Yes, I did.
All right, and this took you, and at that time, the glove was turned inside out, as reflected on the
Oh,
top
God.
left-hand photograph in People's
Oh,
Exhibit
God.
272A.
Oh, Jesus. He's going through minute by minute? Is he going through minute by minute? No, absolutely not.
Yes, it was inside out.
That's how it was when you received it.
Yes,
And you then when you were examining the glove on October 15th, you also did some presumptive testing on different areas of the glove.
that's correct.
And could you tell us exactly what that is and how you did it?
Okay. The presumptive blood testing is with it's a color test, a reagent that when applied, in this case I used orthotolidine, and what one first does is to take a swab and then touch lightly the area of interest where you think there's blood, and then you take that swab now and drop sequentially reagents upon it, with orthotolidine followed by the hydrogen peroxide, and since blood has the what's called a peroxidase-like activity associated with it. If there's blood there, it will turn the reagent blue. You see a nice blue color.
Mr. Simpson, do you spell orthotolidine for the court reporter?
Yes, ORTHO-TOLIDINE.
Thank you.
And the purpose of going over the glove with this otolidine test and looking for all areas that you might think was blood was to identify all the areas that you could see on the inside surface of the glove that you thought would be relevant for purposes of DNA testing.
Well, that's right, except I would probably take out the word all. I'm not sure. There's a lot of blood on that glove, so, but those are the areas I focused on.
And to do this, it took you about 2.5 hours.
Objection, it's vague as to what this is.
Stay.
The examination, documentation, and presumptive testing of the surface of the glove took you, all those activities that you've described on October 15th took you about 2.5 hours. Or you tell me how long it took.
That's approximately correct. Yes, all the activities of that day took about that much time.
Then on October 16th, the next day, you made some cuttings.
Yes,
You cut G1 from, I guess it's the pointer finger,
the index finger, yes.
and G2,
Yes, that's from the side of the middle finger.
and G3,
That's from the ring finger.
all right, and G4.
Yes, that was now down into the towards the middle of the hand.
So, in other words, you were taking cuttings from the index finger, is that right?
That's correct.
And the inside of the middle finger,
Yes, that's correct.
and then from something that would be equivalent on, if you return the glove, out again, right? The inside of, what do you call this finger?
The ring finger.
Ring finger, right?
Yes,
All right. Looking for blood in those areas.
yes,
Right? Then you also looked at an area that would be the middle of the palm, right?
I think we're now talking.
G4.
G4 is actually, I think, the back of the hand because it's inside out. If you look
It's
at
inside out, the back of the hand?
Excuse me, Mr. Scheck, you keep talking over
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Sims.
May I step down?
You may.
Yeah, please.
Why don't you grab the pointer?
G4 is on the back of the hand. It's hard to think because it's inside out. You have to think about it. This notch here is what we call a palmar surface. In other words, that's the surface that the palm would be. Where this G4 then is on the back of the hand.
Okay. Now to do these four cuttings, right?
Yes.
Between each cutting, in your notes, you indicated that you went through the procedure before where you cleaned your instruments with water and alcohol and flamed them.
Yes.
And under each of the cuttings, you put a new one of those chem wipes,
Yes, I did.
all right? When you handled each one of those cuttings.
Yes.
And you changed gloves between each one of the cuttings, or cleaned, or put on, washed your gloves.
Now I don't recall in this particular examination that I did that each time. I'm not sure that I did that each time because this was all one item.
You might have.
Well, I might have,
Objection
but
calls for speculation.
Sustain.
Now, how long did it take you to do those four cuttings? About 5 hours and 40 minutes?
no, I think there's a follow-up. This was a Sunday afternoon, and I think there was still follow-up time. There were additional samples taken and additional documentation that Sunday.
Well, I'm just curious, if you could, to the best of your recollection using your notes, how long do you think it took you to do the cuttings for those four samples?
Oh, those four samples?
And the documentation and your usual procedures?
Probably an hour, something like that, at least, maybe an hour and 15 minutes, something like that, maybe an hour and a half, I'm not sure.
And did there come a point where you proceeded on October 17th with the organic extraction, or your extraction process on those samples?
Let me check my notes on that. Which page were you referring to?
Well, page 72.
Yes, page 72. This would now be October 16th. This is when I began the extraction of those samples.
About how long did that take you?
The first portion that night was fairly quick because I just at that point had all my tubes set up, and I just had to add a couple reagents to those tubes, and then that went overnight. The extraction process takes overnight. You let this to get this DNA out. You have to and with our procedure you have to go overnight. So then we begin now at the 17th.
So how long?
Well, that would probably take about a half an hour, something like that, on the 16th.
The organic extraction?
The start of the organic extraction on the 16th would take about a half an hour.
All right. And then how long did it take you to finish the organic extraction on the next day? Page 77.
So this goes from 72, I guess, over to page 75. I would say I spent probably half a day at least. I worked very slowly, but something like a half day, maybe 4 or 5 hours, something like that.
And then did there come a point when you did an amplification of these G1, G2, G3, and G4?
Yes.
How long did that take?
This would now be after the yield gel.
Yeah, we'll do a yield gel. How long did that take?
Excuse me. The yield gel runs for about an hour. This was a pretty long day. Let's see, I have Dr. Blake coming over around 2100 hours, so that would be what, around 9 o'clock, I guess. I'm running the yield gel during that time. I think it's not until about the 18th. I have Blake depart at 12 a.m. That would be midnight. And I think that the actual setup then starts on the 18th. That would probably take about an hour and a half, something like that. There were some calculations based on the yield gel made, and then there was some laying out of what we were going to amplify. So that would take about an hour and a half, something like that.
All right. And then finally, when you do your amplification run and you get your typing results, about how long did that part of the process take for these 4 samples?
The typing usually is about half a day. I'd say about 4 hours it takes to do the typing. And then if the product gel is run, that's another hour or so.
Now, I heard you say that you work slowly, you said?
Yes, I do.
Well, you work carefully.
Well, yes, I'm very careful. I think I'm very careful.
Nothing wrong with that, is there?
Well, from a production standpoint, it's not. I don't think it's all that good. But in terms of getting the right result, I think it's important to take one's time to do a good job.
Yes. Now, looking at all your results, both on 272A, which is the picture of the glove, and 272B, would it be fair to say that the predominant source of DNA on this glove, whether it be through RFLP typing or PCR-based typing, is consistent with Ronald Goldman?
Well, I can only address those issues, those places where I sampled. You have to remember there's a lot of blood on this glove. Yes. And from the areas that I sampled, I mean, there's a great deal of mixing going on. But overall, from the areas that I sampled, I would say, yes, Mr. Goldman's types were predominant in those areas.
Whether you're looking at the band intensities in RFLP or the dot intensities in PCR or the band intensities in D1S80, it would be your conclusion that his DNA was the predominant source on this glove in most of the areas.
Objection, that misstates the testimony, calls for speculation.
It's a statement, phrase question.
All right. And each of the areas, we'll take it. And would you agree that Mr. Goldman's, that DNA consistent with Mr. Goldman's type, different typing procedures, was the predominant source?
Yes.
Now, you found no trace of DNA consistent with Mr. Simpson In G1, the index finger.
That's correct.
You found no trace of DNA consistent with Mr. Simpson in G2, the middle finger.
That's correct.
You found no trace of Mr. Simpson's DNA consistent with Mr. Simpson in the ring finger.
That's correct.
You found no trace of DNA consistent with Mr. Simpson in G4 at the back of the hand.
That's correct.
At G14, the bottom of the glove, you found no trace of DNA consistent with Mr. Simpson.
That's correct.
All right? The three areas where you found traces of DNA on the D1S80 system that were consistent with Mr. Simpson were G10, G11, and G13.
Yes.
Now, turning first to G10, you extracted a total of 44 nanograms of DNA.
I'll check that. That's, actually, there's a little more than that because this was now available after the quantitation. So it was a little over 44 nanograms, yes.
And looking at band intensities on the D1S80 system, would you say that the proportion, let me ask you, how would you estimate the proportion of DNA within that area?
To take up before we invite the jurors to continue and conclude the cross-examination of Mr. Sims.
Just, I wondered if there'd been any in-camera review based on the inquiry I made yesterday about the stains on the back gate, Your Honor.
All right, that matter was delegated to Mr. Douglas, and Mr. Douglas is just arriving. We'll take that up at an appropriate time.
Could we have just a moment? There's a scheduling problem that I wanted to alert you to. It doesn't have to be on the record, but I have to tell you about it today, Your Honor.
Come on down. All right, thank you, counsel. Anything else we need to put on the record before we invite the jurors to join us? And Mr. Scheck, do you know what you're going to need in the way of exhibits? Because we've got sort of a zoo over here right now.
Yeah, I think I have it fairly well planned. I'm going to start with that.
All right, I'm just
chart.
a little concerned because the smaller easel is just sort of leaned up here.
Oh, okay, I'll just get that.
Just a matter of logistics here. All right, Deputy McNair, let's have the jurors, please.
Chart and number? I don't remember.
All right, let the record reflect that we've now been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Did we enjoy our activities over the weekend? Okay. That was something I wanted to do myself. That's how you got that. All right, Mr. Sims, would you resume the witness stand, please? All right, good morning again, Mr. Sims.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Mr. Sims, you were reminded, sir, you were still under oath, and Mr. Scheck, you may continue with your cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Morning, Mr. Sims. How
Good
are you,
morning.
sir?
Fine, thank you.
Your Honor, I'd like to start by marking a chart that I think has a label over the top, defense hypothetical, is defendant's next in order. And I think
1165.
1165, and ask Mr. Harris to project that. And I'll approach the witness. Now, Mr. Sims, you recall on Thursday afternoon, we reviewed based on a hypothetical that I gave you concerning an assumption of random distribution of biological material over the swatches. You made a series of estimations or approximations of the amount of human DNA in various items of evidence. Do you recall that?
Yes, and I recall too the assumption as to how much of the total swatch I was getting was part of this calculation.
That's correct.
Because that's part of your assumption, but that wasn't in my original notes.
I understand. There was we made some assumptions about numbers of swatches and weights of those swatches that were not in your possession, but were in the possession of Cellmark.
Okay.
All right. But based on those figures, you made these estimations, correct? As reflected in defendant's
1165.
1165.
Well, these numbers do look similar to what I said, although I don't recall the specific numbers.
Right. You recall that we, I think on Friday, I handed you a copy of this chart, and at that time you checked it against your numbers.
It looks reasonable to me.
Okay. And just to review then, that in terms of, on the left-hand column, that reflects nanograms of human DNA.
On the, now this is now on the left-hand side of the.
Yeah.
Yes,
This is
that
nanograms.
Well, that's now on 117. It's important to note that I did not run a specific human test on that. That my quantitation was only based on a yield gel on 117.
But in terms of your yield gel showed little bacterial DNA. It looked to you human.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, and just so we're clear on this, 47, 48, 49, 50, and 52 are the items that were recovered on June 13th from the Bundy walkway.
Yes.
And 117 is the material that was found on the rear gate on July 3rd.
Yes.
And now, in this FBI report about environmental effects of DNA, do you recall that they reached a conclusion with respect to exposure to sunlight eventually causes degradation of DNA and stains to the point that no typing results can be obtained?
Which which particular FBI study is that? Is that in the Journal of Forensic Sciences or?
Yes, I'm referring that to, I don't know if it was ever given an item number in evidence, but call your attention to page 1646.
Mrs. Robertson doesn't recollect that study.
Yes, this is an article entitled,
Yes, this is the Comey article in November 91, Journal of Forensic Sciences.
How do you spell the name?
COMEY.
Thank you.
and does that refresh your recollection as to the conclusion they reached with respect to the exposure to sunlight? What that can do in terms of degradation?
Good. I'd like one moment just to review it.
Take your time.
Are we talking about sunlight or ultraviolet?
Sunlight.
Okay.
And I think you previously testified on direct examination that exposure to soil and dirt can lead to bacterial degradation of DNA in a bloodstain.
Yes.
Now, finally, with respect to this chart, let's go back to the sock for a second.
Okay.
And you recall there was a cutout of about 3/4 of an inch to a half-inch high in the ankle of one of those socks.
Yes.
And as you indicated before, there was even some what appeared to be reddish staining or blood that was still on the sock in the area where the cutout had been made.
Yes, around the edges there's still a little bit of staining there.
And when you received the sock from the Los Angeles Police Department, you found swatches inside a tube that had been cut by Greg Matheson.
Yes.
And you used how many of those swatches?
I used 3 of the 4.
3 of the 4. And
So
on
if you're
just
talking about the court reporter jobs, if you're self-employed, no, they don't come with benefits, but you make a lot more. But there's a trade-off, because if you work for yourself, the equipment they use is like $10,000 to get the court reporter equipment. So if you work for the government, you make a lot less, but you don't have to pay that money, and you get benefits, government benefits, which are really good.
3 of those swatches, when you did a slot blot analysis, you came up with 1,350 nanograms of human DNA.
Well, now that was not a slot blot, that was a yield gel.
Yield gel.
Yield gel analysis.
But there was no evidence in your yield gel analysis of bacterial degradation in that sock.
No, I don't recall seeing any.
And so if one were to, so that's just 3 of the 4 stains where you got that 1,350 nanogram estimate from the yield gel.
Yes.
Now, if we were to plot what 1,350 nanograms look like in terms of this chart, you would have, wouldn't you agree, one of these red bars that would go like right through the top of the screen.
Yes, it would.
And it would be fair to say that the amount of DNA in that cutout section of the sock was a comparatively concentrated sample, I think were your words last week.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you did not receive the socks for testing at your laboratory until September 26th, 1994.
I believe that's the correct date.
And so on September 21st, 1994, you had no DNA results consistent with the DNA typings of Nicole Brown Simpson from that sock.
That's correct.
So to the best of your knowledge, there would be absolutely no factual basis for anyone saying on September 21st, 1994, that DNA tests had been performed on the socks and results had been obtained.
Objection, hearsay,
Sustained.
argumentative, no foundation.
Sustained.
To your knowledge, has anyone in your laboratory, including yourself, ever communicated DNA test results to members of the press prior to communicating them to the prosecution of the court?
Objections irrelevant, false for hearsay, no foundation.
Overruled. You can answer that question, yes or no.
No.
And obviously, as far as you know, no one from your laboratory, including yourself, ever said on September 21st before you...
Sustained. Sustained.
All right. I think we're finished with that chart. Just a few more quick questions on precautions against contamination in the laboratory. Could you tell the jury what a laminar flow hood is?
Yes, a laminar flow hood is one that is designed such that when you're working inside of it, nothing gets into it and nothing gets out of it, because it basically creates a curtain of air that is like a barrier to keep things from either getting in or getting out of that hood.
Could you describe the air flow in that hood, how it works?
Yes, it's sort of a circular flow process, so that it's sort of hard to explain. I'll try to do this, but I think if you all know what a hood is, you're inside, it's an enclosed area inside, like a little case that you're working in. And the airflow is such that it is sucked down to form this curtain, and then it goes back through the back of it, it goes through a filter system, and then it comes back down around. So you've always got this barrier of air that keeps things from getting in and getting out. And when I say things, I'm talking about dusts and aerosols and that sort of thing.
And you literally would stick your hand through these, there's like holes that you stick your hand in?
Well, it's an opening. It actually is an opening. So you are putting your hands through that opening.
Putting your hands into the glove.
Okay. All right. Listen, we have already gone through what this is with Dr. Cotton ad nauseum. But the way he describes it is very exciting.
Yes.
And that's where you will do your work for the extractions?
Now that is where we always do our PCR setups.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we do the setups for the PCR amplification.
And the hood that you use, is the airflow such that you suck air from inside the laboratory into the hood and then out?
No, it's continuously recirculating the air as I understand it.
Mm-hmm. And is there something called a fume hood?
Yes, there is.
And a fume hood is a hood where you suck air from inside of the laboratory into the thing and then out.
Yes, and that's used when we're doing, for example, the phenol chloroform extractions, because you don't want to breathe this phenol. It's not a good, or chloroform for that matter either. Those are chemicals you don't want to breathe, and so you work in a fume hood to remove those fumes away from yourself.
You don't know what I want.
There's a difference between a fume hood and a laminar flow hood.
Yes.
And a laminar flow hood is the one that's specifically designed to prevent aerosols and particulates from inside the laboratory from getting inside that hood.
Or from things in there getting out, both ways.
Okay.
You want to spell laminar for the court reporter?
Yes, L-A-M-I-N-A-R, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, we had a discussion about PCR carryover contamination on, I think it was Friday morning.
Yes.
We
Riveting
talked about those
discussion.
billions of fragments.
Yes.
And just to be clear about it, I was asking you about the visibility.
I think you tried to say trillions, and you tried to say that that one little test tube would cover a bunch of square miles. Just cover a bunch of square miles. Just what's in that, this much stuff in the bottom of that test tube. I think that's where you were going on Friday, right?
Of those fragments, do you recall that?
Yes.
And you said that they were invisible?
Yes.
All right, and just so that we're very clear, they're in a liquid, is that correct?
Well, yes, they would be in a liquid, and so the only thing you could see would be if you got a droplet or something like that on a glove. You could see them as part of that drop, but you don't really see the particles. They're too small.
And the smallest amount of that could contain thousands of amplicons, as they're called.
Yes.
Enough to cover 3 cities, at least.
Now, we talked a little bit about methods that one would pursue in trying to determine whether you had contamination in your laboratory. You recall that?
Yes.
Now, if you had in your laboratory contamination such that you could see on your DQ alpha strips, and we'll review those strips in a minute, but they have all these dots on them, right?
Yes.
And if you
Oh,
saw
goody.
that some of the dots were lighting up with pretty significant intensity that you knew shouldn't be lighting up in your quality assurance standards, your quality control standards, or your positive controls, that would be a strong indication that there was contamination in your laboratory.
If there were no other reason for that. For example, I've seen reference blood samples where somebody's been transfused, which creates a mixture situation. That would be one example. Also, as I pointed out earlier, sometimes with this DQ alpha system, you will see some very weak dots because of what's called cross-hybridization phenomenon. So those things you have to always take into account, but there are certain things you look for. For example, in your extraction reagent blank, your negative controls, if you see any dots in those, then that would signal that you have some form of contamination. That's the best thing to look at.
Before we go into some of those things you mentioned, I'm just asking you about a pretty simple situation where you see on the negative control, the positive control, and
Asked and
your quality
answered.
control samples.
He just
dots
answered
of, not faint, but reasonably strong intensity are lighting up in a series of cases.
Yes.
Got that in mind?
Yes.
All right. And that would be certainly an indication that there may well be a contamination in your laboratory.
Yes, that would tell you that you may have a contamination problem.
And let us further, now would one procedure one would follow to try to get to the source of that contamination to look at the lots from which the reagents or chemicals came from?
Yes.
What could you tell the jury again what a lot is?
A lot is, excuse me, the way we set up our laboratory is we work with lots of these kits that are provided by a commercial provider. And so we divide each shipment of those kits into a lot. And each kit includes reagents such as with a cocktail, I guess Dr. Cotton has talked about this, so I won't go into it in detail, but they have the various reagents that are used as part of this kit. We also have lot numbers for the reagents that are used to extract DNA in our laboratory, so that would be a lot of reagents that we would check out also.
Let's just focus for a second on the lots of reagents that come in those kits.
Okay?
And those kits are provided by a company that's now known as Roche Biomedical.
Yes, it's Roche Molecular Systems, and then it's marketed by Perkin-Elmer.
And let us assume in this...
No, they all have to wear shame signs for their week. Shame, shame, shame. And they have to walk around with them on.
hypothetical I gave you about searching for the source of contamination, that one develops a hypothesis that maybe the source of contamination are those kits, the lots from those kits. Are you with me?
Yes.
All right. And you go back to the manufacturer and you determine that there are no reports of any contamination being discovered in those kits.
Okay. In other words, the other users around the country are saying we didn't see that in that lot number?
Yes, and there's a person named Dr. Rebecca Reynolds, or Rebecca Reynolds, I don't know if she's a doctor.
Yes, I know. She is a doctor.
Dr. Rebecca Reynolds. And she would be actually the person you would call to check out whether or not a lot was contaminated from Roche or Perkin-Elmer.
She's one of the people that you might talk to, yes. There are other people there, too, that we would go through.
And if in this situation you learn from Rebecca Reynolds or some other person that there was nothing wrong with these lots.
Irrelevant.
Sustain. Directly with this laboratory's usage?
I'm sorry?
It's
Yes.
not relevant, unless it's directed towards this lab's
Yes.
usage.
All right. In terms of your usage, if you determined in a search for contamination from Roche that there was nothing wrong with the kits or lots, would that then lead you to search further for the source of contamination?
Objections are relevant, improper, hypothetical, no foundation.
Overruled.
Yes.
You want to spell Roach and Perkin-Elmer for the court
Roche,
reporter?
R-O-C-H-E, and Perkin-Elmer, now this may be harder for me, P-E-R-K-I-N-E-L-M-E-R. Let's discuss for a few minutes proficiency testing.
Okay.
Did you see Dr. Cotton's testimony with respect to the different kinds of proficiency testing?
I think I do remember a chart about blind. I think it was one that Mr. Neufeld prepared.
Yes.
I remember him writing. I have an image of that, yes.
Okay, just for benefit. I think this is Mr. Neufeld's writing, and it would be 1153. Can you see that in the back? I guess not. Let me just take a second. I'll move this over here.
Better.
Better?
Better.
Now, would you agree with,
But you're also standing between it and
right,
165.
and that's actually not going to be visible to me. Let's see. That, is that, see that? And can you,
All right, Mr. Sheck, if you would, let me address the jurors
I'm
directly.
sorry.
Thank you.
Now, this even has Mr. Neufeld's bad spelling, as I recall it. Now, would you agree that in terms of the generic types of proficiency tests, that one type is what's known as an open test,
Yes.
and that's where the examiners know they're being tested,
Yes.
and then there are blind tests where the examiners don't know that it's a test?
Yes, that's my general understanding, and I think in the Twig Dam guidelines, that's what's mentioned as open versus blind.
All right. And then there are external tests where the samples are provided to the laboratory by individuals who are independent of the laboratory and don't necessarily know the strengths and weaknesses of the lab.
Yes.
And then there are internal tests which are provided by the laboratory to test itself.
Yes.
And then, of course, so there would be open externals, open internals, then blind externals, and blind internals.
Yes.
Okay. So we're clear on that terminology.
Yes.
Now, with respect to the proficiency tests, withdrawn, would you agree that as much as possible, one would want proficiency tests to duplicate or replicate casework, to be like casework?
Yes, I think as a concept, I would agree with that.
And that in terms of all those kinds of tests, the form of testing that would be most like casework would be an external blind test.
Well, I suppose if one makes a distinction between whether or not one knows one is being tested, is that
Yes.
that's probably true. Yes.
And would you agree that proficiency tests provides one way to measure the error rate of a DNA laboratory?
Yes.
And would you agree that in clinical work, DNA laboratories will often find out they made errors when doctors notify them that an incorrect diagnosis was made?
Sustain.
Well, you indicated on direct examination that you had some familiarity with the use of DNA typing processes in clinical medicine.
Yes, a very general familiarity.
Well, in a general way, wouldn't you agree that a DNA typing laboratory that is doing work for doctors in clinical medicine can find out that they made an error in their DNA typing results if the doctor calls them and says, your predicted result did not match what we found when we actually did some further tests on the patient?
Relevant, improper foundation.
Sustain.
Well, would you agree that in forensic work, it's harder to determine if a laboratory made an error in casework than in clinical medicine?
Which calls for speculation and inadequate foundation.
Sustain.
Well, based on your general knowledge of clinical medicine, would you agree, and DNA typing in clinical medicine, would you agree that in forensic work, it's harder to determine whether a laboratory made an error than it is in clinical medicine?
Sustain.
Thank you.
You don't seem to like this line. Okay.
I didn't Friday either.
Yeah. We'll get to this, I suppose, with other witnesses.
Not through this witness.
Would you agree that in a proficiency test, even if you don't get a wrong answer, that the test can reveal weaknesses and discrepancies in a laboratory's work that are important to note because they can lead to errors in other situations?
Objection, argumentative, compound.
Overruled.
I think I'd need a little more like an example of where you're going with that. I'm not sure I understand the question otherwise.
If you take a proficiency test and there are some discrepancies in your typing results, let's say some evidence of contaminants or irregularities on a dot blot for DQ alpha, for example, but they don't prevent you on that particular test from getting a wrong answer. Are you with me?
Yes.
It's still important to note what those discrepancies or irregularities are, because on another test with another set of samples, those could lead to errors.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that proficiency tests can help a laboratory identify.
Yes, I agree.
Now, the only proficiency tests that have been conducted in your laboratory from external sources are open proficiency tests.
Yes.
And you're familiar with the recommendation, the section of the National Academy of Sciences report that talks about laboratory error rate?
I've read that section, yes.
And is that a section that you would rely upon in forming your opinions concerning laboratory error rates in external blind proficiency testing?
Well, the problem that I have with regards to the NRC is they're not clear on what a blind test is in their own definitions.
Have you ever looked at the glossary of terms at page 171 of the NRC report?
Objections, hearsay.
Sustained.
721.
Let me call your attention to page 171 of the NRC report.
Objection, calling to attention is irrelevant. It's hearsay at this point.
It's overruled. He can direct his attention to something and attempt to lay a foundation here.
Would you please read that section to yourself?
Mr. Harmon, do you have that? Do you have that? All right.
Okay.
Now, you just said that one of the problems you thought you had with the NRC report is the way they defined the different kinds of proficiency testing?
Yes, it is.
Objection, inadequate foundation is hearsay.
That question is not overruled.
Would you agree that in the glossary of terms that the NRC defines the different kinds of...
Sustained.
Hearsay.
Sustained.
Would you rely upon the definition in the glossary section at page 171 of the NRC report in terms of its definition of proficiency testing?
Objection is irrelevant. Cause for
Sustained.
hearsay.
The question is not appropriately phrased, Counsel. It's not prospective. It's have you.
Have you relied on the section in the glossary, definition section of the glossary, for forming your opinions about what the NRC means with respect to proficiency tests and how they're defined?
Objection is irrelevant. Inadequate
Sustained.
foundation.
In forming your opinions with respect to proficiency testing and DNA testing, would you rely upon the glossary section definition of the NRC report in forming
Sustained.
your opinions? Looking at the glossary section, does that refresh your recollection as to how the NRC defines proficiency tests?
Objection is argumentative. It's
Sustained.
hearsay.
Have you relied on the definition section of the NRC report with respect to proficiency testing?
Objection, cause for hearsay, inadequate foundation. It's vague.
Overruled.
Thank you.
Have I relied on the NRC to tell me what those definitions are? Is that the question?
Yeah, would you
Because
rely-
the answer to
have
that
you-
is no. I would not
You have your own
necessarily rely on
definitions.
this.
All right, but you gave us testimony a second ago about what you thought the NRC meant, how it defined proficiency testing.
Well, that's correct.
All right. In deciding what the NRC meant about different kinds of proficiency testing, had you previously relied on the definition section in the glossary?
Objection, that's irrelevant, compound, unintelligible. It's argumentative.
Overruled.
Not in the definition section, but there's other places in this writing where it's very confusing to me.
Well, does the definition section clear it up?
This is what I think is correct.
And that is what is also reflected on our charts that Dr. Cotton gave?
Yes.
Okay. Now, getting to the section of the report that deals with laboratory error rates. I'm only asking him about whether he's...
Well, this is foundational, I assume.
The section of the report dealing with laboratory error rates, starting on page 88 to page 89. Do you rely upon the National Academy of Sciences report with respect to laboratory error rates, how laboratory error rates should be measured? Do you rely upon that in forming your opinions concerning error rates in DNA typing?
On their,
I just Googled what is waterboarding torture, and their pictures came up, both of them together.
I think I need more definition from you on that. I mean, are they saying that you should take a look at proficiency rates or proficiency error rates? I mean, I would agree with that.
All right. Do you rely upon that section which states that error rates ought to be determined through external blind proficiency testing?
Sustained.
Can we
That's
approach
that's
it
an inappropriate way to phrase that
All
question,
right.
Counsel. No.
Yeah.
Have a seat, Mr. Harmon.
Let me call your... I'm sorry.
I was asking Mr. Harmon to have a seat.
Let me call...
But, Counsel, we're not getting anywhere with this. Why don't you just ask him about the advantages, disadvantages, about the different types of proficiency testing, and let's move on.
All right.
The NRC report is not coming in through this witness.
Well, if he agrees with it.
Has to rely upon it in forming his opinions, Counsel.
Would you-
You don't have the foundation.
All right. Let me just look, just call your attention. You're saying some parts of what they discuss about laboratory error rates you would rely upon?
No, you asked me what I agree with them, I think is what
No,
they...
no, unfortunately, I can't ask you that question. I have to ask you the question, have you relied upon those sections of the NRC report dealing with how to measure laboratory error rate in forming your opinions?
No.
Okay. Thank you for the no. Now, in terms of, you took a few proficiency tests, external proficiency tests that were provided to you by the College of American Pathology and the Collaborative Testing Service.
Actually, the collaborative testing service is correct. The other ones that we did were through the United Kingdom branch of Cellmark.
Okay. Now, in either the, there's an acronym for the IQAS is the Cellmark acronym?
I don't use it, but I think there is an International Quality Assurance Scheme or something like that.
So there's the IQAS proficiency tests and the so-called CTS proficiency tests.
Yes.
And these are open tests.
Yes, they are done as open tests.
Now, in these tests, did you receive degraded samples, samples that were substantially degraded as specimens to analyze?
No, I don't, in the ones I looked at, no.
All right? But it is substantially degraded specimens that we're dealing with, certainly with respect to the Bundy blood drops in this case.
Well, I don't think number 52 is substantially degraded. I think some of the other Bundy drops, I would agree with that. 47, 48, 49, and 50, I think would be correct. But 52, I don't think was substantially
All right?
degraded.
It was, you don't like the word substantially there?
Well, that's, yes, I would draw the line there.
All right? How would you characterize the degradation level of sample 52?
Well, again, I don't think I can answer that because all I did was a slot plot on it, but I know that Dr. Cotton was able to get an RFLP result out of it, so that tells me it's not substantially degraded.
Well, the RFLP result, withdrawn. If an RFLP result can be obtained on as little as 25 to 30 nanograms of human DNA.
Something like that, yes.
All right? And that's at the low end of the system, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And ordinarily, a blood drop, a drop of blood, would contain how many nanograms of human DNA?
Sustained.
It's
Sustained.
just foundational and definition of degraded.
We've asked that question, I think, 4 or 5 times.
What would be your expectation? Withdrawn. You, in August of this year, you
Yeah.
performed an initial inspection of these swatches.
August of '94.
August of '94, I'm sorry.
Yes.
And you did a yield gel on some of these swatches.
Yes.
And you only did a slot blot after you did the yield gel.
That's correct.
And after looking at the yield gels, but before doing the slot plots, you offered some testimony with respect to your expectations as to how much DNA you would find in the Bundy blood drops.
I don't recall it being an expectation. I think at that point we had discussed potentially how much we had found. This was back in August, right?
And based on a yield gel, for example, for items, you were getting readings of as high as 150 nanograms of DNA, of high molecular weight DNA, based on the yield gel.
That's correct.
But you couldn't tell from a yield gel whether that DNA was bacterial or human.
That's correct.
And when you subsequently did the slot blot to find out how much human DNA was in the sample, you found out that it was substantially less than 150 nanograms.
Much less than 150 nanograms of human DNA, yes.
And what that did is that when you did that slot blot, you realized that there was a lot more bacterial degradation in these Bundy blood drops than even you had initially anticipated when looking at these swatches and doing your yield gels in August.
Yes.
Now, getting back to the question about proficiency testing, I take it you are agreeing that
Why
the
in
proficiency...
the heck couldn't you ask that question 6 freaking days ago before we are done with you? We are done with your questions. We are up to here. That was an important question. Why couldn't you ask that back when we were excited for you?
tests that you received from Collaborative Testing Service and IQAS did not involve substantially degraded samples.
That's correct.
The California Association of Crime Labs proficiency tests, however, you know those did involve substantially degraded samples.
No foundation.
Sustained.
Do you know if the CACLD proficiency tests involve substantially degraded samples?
Objection, falsely hearsay, no foundation.
Overruled.
Yes, I do know some of them were substantially degraded.
And in fact, when they, in preparation of the samples for the CACLD proficiency test, some of those samples were deliberately subjected to severe environmental conditions in order to degrade them.
That's my understanding, yes.
But the approach of CTS and IQAS in the proficiency test that you take is not to intentionally degrade the samples.
I would agree with that.
And wouldn't you agree that in casework, laboratories such as yours are routinely encountering degraded samples in terms of performing your DNA analysis?
Objection, false conclusion, inadequate foundation, may call
Sustained.
for hearsay.
Why don't you rephrase the question?
All right. In your lab work, do you not encounter on a routine basis in your cases substantially degraded specimens for purposes of performing DNA analysis?
At times we do, yes.
And wouldn't you agree that it would be withdrawn? And wouldn't you agree that well-designed proficiency tests that are intended to duplicate what you actually get in casework ought to involve degraded samples?
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
Would you agree? Mr. Sims, I understand that you can only subscribe to those proficiency testing services which are available. Fair
Yes.
enough?
Yes.
And these questions are really directed at the kinds of tests that are available for you to take.
Yes.
But in terms of the tests that are available for you to take, withdrawn. In terms of designing a proficiency test that would replicate, duplicate what your lab actually encounters in casework, wouldn't you agree it would be a good idea to have specimens that are degraded?
Irrelevant, no foundation, calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Well, I think it's a somewhat complex issue because on the one hand, when we're doing RFLP proficiencies, it only works with samples that are not substantially degraded. So if we're testing people for their RFLP ability, then it doesn't make sense to me to do work with degraded samples because you won't get an RFLP if it's substantially degraded. On the other hand, I see no problem with looking at degraded samples if you're going to look for PCR type results. And this whole issue of designing proficiency tests that fairly test all the laboratories is something that, is being worked out. There are some questions there about what different types of samples one may want to look at so that everybody is fairly tested. That's an issue.
Let's talk about mixtures and proficiency testing.
Okay.
In any of the open proficiency tests that you have done, were there mixtures of blood on a blood stain
where one source contributed a considerably smaller amount than the other?
Sustain. Rephrase the question.
All right. Were there mixtures in any of these open proficiency tests that you took of bloodstains where the contribution of one, you found out later, the contribution of one of the contributors was much greater than the contribution of a second or third contributor?
Have you done proficiency testing that involved mixed samples?
Yes?
All right. Have there been significant differences in the contributions that you were able to detect?
Yes, for example, on the sexual assault
No,
type
no,
evidence.
I'm asking about bloodstains.
Bloodstains.
I recall in the laboratory that there was one that was submitted where they tried to catch the lab as to whether or not they could detect two stains that were mixed like that. I think it was one of the CTS ones.
Where one of the contributions was much larger than the other one.
I think that was the scenario. Now, that was not done by me, but somebody else in our laboratory had one where I think that was the issue, whether or not they could detect this mixing.
Well, a mixture of saliva and blood or a mixture of blood and blood?
I think it was two bloods. I'd have to check, because again, that was not my personal test, but I think we had something like that come through the laboratory.
Which one would that be?
I don't know the numbers offhand. I'd have to go back to the lab and look into that.
Are you certain of that?
You just said you'd have to go back to the numbers.
All right.
That's argument.
Maybe, well, I'm only asking if you said,
No,
what you're telling
sanction
us
him.
is you think that might be true, but you're not
No.
sure.
I'm not
Sanction
absolutely
him.
sure, but I have a recollection of that, yes.
Now, but you personally, for example, have taken no tests involving the mixtures of blood where one source contributes a much greater amount than another.
Where there were two blood samples
Yeah,
mixed?
blood.
No.
All right.
No.
And have you ever taken a proficiency test where you were trying to detect genotypes in a mixed blood stain where there was more than two contributors, where there was 3 or 4 contributors?
No.
But in this case, you've been asked to analyze blood stains that, at least the prosecution is claiming, has as many as 3 sources.
Yes.
And you have never taken a proficiency test, even an open proficiency test, that involves such a situation.
That's correct.
Now, wouldn't you agree that in terms of DNA typing, that particularly PCR-based typing, that mixtures present special problems?
Well, there's two things. You have to be able to detect the mixture, and then you have to be able to interpret the mixture.
Now, I noticed on direct examination that you never used any of these dot blot strips to explain how you got your results. Am I correct in that?
I don't think any dot plot results were presented.
Right. But that's how you got all these DQ alpha results using this dot blot strip.
That's correct.
All right. And what I asked is to have this marked defendants next in order.
1166. Have you shown that to Mr. Harmon?
Yeah. Now, what I'm going to put up on the Elmo here is, to start with, is just a dot blot strip. And what I'd like you to do, Mr. Sims, is explain to the jury, if we could go through it step by step, how one reads one of these strips.
Okay?
Now let's just back further. Okay, why don't we just use for a second the one at the top that is labeled DNA 17C. Okay?
Okay.
That one's blank, right?
Okay.
And starting from the left to the right, could you please tell the jury there are a series of numbers across this strip, correct?
Yes.
All right. And could you tell the jury what each of these numbers represents and how one gets a reading off one of these strips? And
Okay.
if maybe we should even use, we have one of those telestrator things. Maybe we're trying to simulate a direct examination, Mr. Sims. Maybe you could come down and stand next to me or stand over here, and you know how to use this point maker now? Yeah. Sure better than I. I'm sorry. There you go. Okay, so starting with the one that says DNA 17, could you tell us what, starting on the left, what the 1 represents?
Okay, the 1 is for the overall type 1 probe. In other words, we'll talk later about the subtypes of the 1, but the first thing is that that's an overall 1 probe that's, now keep in mind the probe in this case is already on the strip. That's what the manufacturer does. They provide you with a strip that has the probe already on it. You recall we talked about RFLP, we put the DNA onto the strip and then we hit it with the probe. Well, here we put the probe already on the strip, the probe's already on the strip, and now we hit it with the DNA. So this is why it's called a reverse dot block.
And wouldn't it be fair to say that the way this PCR-based method works is that you you extract the swatches, right?
Right.
You cut them up, you put them in those test tubes, those little test tubes.
Right.
And then you amplify up the DNA.
Right.
And so what you're really doing is you're pouring that so-called amplified product over the strip.
Right.
And then when you pour the amplified product over the strip, you see which of these blue dots light up and which ones don't.
Right.
Okay. So what I take it you're saying is that starting on the far left-hand side of 17, the blank one, that there's a dot there that we can't see lit up, correct?
Say it again,
On the blank one, the second one down.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
So that's where you have the pointer right now. Now, underneath, right next to that 1, there's a little piece of probe, right?
That's right. There's
And when
a dot of probe.
A dot of probe. When you pour the amplified product up, if there's any genotype that is part of the 1 system here, okay, that dot should light up.
That's correct.
And there are subtypes that we'll discuss as we go across the strip of the 1. There's a 1.1, a 1.2, and a 1.3.
That's correct.
Okay. Could you move to the right now? What's next to that 1?
Okay, the next one is for what we call the 2 allele. There would be a probe there.
Please use the second strip down, the one that doesn't have anything lit on it,
Okay.
okay? That's where the 2 would be.
That's where the 2 would be.
So if there was anybody that had a genotype for the 2 and you poured the amplified product on the strip, the blue dot should light up.
Yes.
Okay, moving to the right, what do we have?
That's the 3 probe right in that area.
So if we pour amplified product on the strip and there's anybody that has a 3 allele, right, that should light up.
Yes.
All right, next.
This is the 4 probe allele right there.
So if we pour amplified product on the strip and somebody has a 4 allele, that blue dot should light up.
That's correct.
All right, now what's this next dot?
Okay, this is an important dot right here. This is called the C, or control dot. And the point for the control dot is that tells you, first of all, that you had enough DNA on the sample to see both of the alleles in a sample. In other words, there's enough DNA to get a result, a typing result. It also is useful in that it can be used to gauge the relative contributions of samples when you start to look at a mixture situation. And we'll talk about that, I think, later on if I'm guessing where you're going with this.
Oh, yeah, we'll talk about that.
But that's an important dot, is that C dot.
Well, let's talk about that just for 1 second, see if we understand this. So this C dot, they call that the all control, right?
Yes, that's what they used to call it, I believe.
And it has less probe on it than the other dots?
That's correct.
So the theory is that when you pour amplified product over this strip, that if this C dot lights up, right,
Yes.
then that means you're not missing any potential alleles, because if this dot lights up, then you should be detecting all the other potential alleles in the mixture.
In a non-mixed
Not a
sample.
non-mixed sample.
In a non-mixed sample, that's
Right.
important.
Now, of course, as we're going to get to in a second, when you have a mixture, that C dot has less utility as a control, doesn't it?
No, I think, for example, in Dr. Blake's article, he talks about using that as a convention, and looking at the intensity of the dots relative to the C. So I wouldn't say it's...
Well, let me put it to you this
Excuse
way.
me, counsel, you need to not interrupt his answer. You need not to talk at the same time.
Let me formulate the question for you this way. When you have a mixture and you pour the amplified product over the C dot can be lit up by the primary contributor of the mixture, correct?
That's correct.
And so if there is a secondary or a second contributor to the mixture, or a third contributor to the mixture, or even a fourth contributor to the mixture that have less DNA from those sources, are you with me?
Yes.
The C dot won't tell you about whether you're missing any alleles from the second and third and fourth contributors.
Chitty, it's like you caught me. It's like you realize that I was not paying attention for the last 20 minutes or so. I don't even remember him getting down off the stand. The last time we were with him, they were talking about an NCR book glossary or something. That's the very last thing I remember about this trial.
Contributor, because the C dot is being lit up by the primary contributor.
That's true.
And in that situation where you have such a mixture, the utility of the C dot control in terms of telling you whether you're seeing all the alleles
is not as good as it would be where it was just one person.
Well, again, I mean, you can only talk about what you can see there, but your point is well taken, that you can't say much more about those very weak dots.
Okay. And of course, what we're dealing with in this case, as we'll discuss in a minute, are mixtures which involve at least 3 contributors according to the analysis the prosecution has put up here.
Well,
Could be 3.
Could be 3.
Could be more, right?
We don't know exactly how many.
Okay. We'll discuss that in a minute. Now, so that's the C dot.
That's the C dot. That's the important C dot, right?
Right. Now, the next dot over to the right, what's that?
That's the 1.1 dot. So now we're getting into the subtyping of the 1 alleles, because the 1 allele can be broken down into the 1.1, the 1.2, and the 1.3.
And when you're seeing a 1.1, you should also see that 1 over at the left-hand side, right?
If that 1.1 is definitely due to a 1.1, you should, yes.
And when you make that caveat, if it's a real 1.1, sometimes in this system, there are limitations to this system.
Yes, I think I mentioned that on the direct examination.
And one of the problems that an analyst has with this system is sometimes these dots light up faintly, and it is difficult to tell whether the dot represents a real allele in the mixture.
Okay.
or-
I feel I can pay attention if I transform what they're talking about into light bright. Try it, guys.
It is what is, I guess, in your business called an artifact.
Yes, that's one of the limitations of the system.
And could you tell the jury what an artifact is?
An artifact would be, for example, if you're seeing some signal at one of these dots that's very weak, but it's not really part of the actual type.
So would it be a fair way to distinguish it is that sometimes you see a dot light up and you know it's real in the sense that it actually represents the DNA from the original source?
Well, that you really are seeing the type.
Really are seeing the type. And then sometimes these dots can light up and it's not real. It's an artifact.
If they're weak, that's true. If they're very weak, that's true.
Now let's move over to the next dot. Now this gets a little complicated, doesn't it?
Yes, this is where the system gets complicated. And the basic limitation is that there is not a unique probe for this 1.2 allele. So we don't have a single dot that says this is what you see light up if the 1.2 is there. So what you have to do is you have to do a little bit of logic here, and you have to do a little bit of logic to decide whether or not the 1.2 is there against the contribution here from the 1.3 or the contribution from the 4. And it's hard to do it without showing you an example, but I think you'll recall seeing a lot of my results where I said possible 1.2, possible 1.2. That's because you can't always say that the 1.2 is present. For example, if the 4 allele is definitely present, you may have trouble saying, could there be a 1.2 there also? That's why you saw a lot of those results in parentheses, and that's one of the limitations of the system, and I have to make the assumption that that result, that dot could be there, that type could be there, I just can't detect it in a mix.
Let me try to break it down as simple as we can for reading this particular dot. What that dot represents is that if that dot lights up, you could either have the 1.2 allele,
Yes,
you could have the 1.3 allele,
Yes.
or you could have the 4 allele,
yes, or combinations thereof.
or combinations. But one way you can double check is if that dot lights up and the 4 dot lights up, you know that there's a 4.
That's correct.
And if this particular dot lights up and the 1.3 directly to the right of it lights up, you know you have a 1.3.
Yes,
And then sometimes you might be lucky enough by process of elimination to determine if you have a 1.2.
that's correct.
Okay, moving over to the right, and this is a dot of some significance for your laboratory, I take it. That is the 1.3 dot.
Yes,
And if you have a 1.3 allele present, that dot should light up.
yes, if the 1.3 is there, you should definitely see that dot light up. Sometimes this is the one that is the most useful indicator of this cross-hide phenomenon that I talked about, because it's very, very close in its DNA sequence to some of the other alleles. And so if you see any of this weakness in the background, that could be an artifact. And that's one you really key on when you look at these types of strips.
So in other words, you anticipate I'm going to ask you some questions about interpreting this 1.3 dot, don't you?
Well, I had no idea you were going to say that. Of course.
There were
yes,
some
this is a
problems.
This is a critical dot. I would agree with you.
And your laboratory does
I
have some
knew
problems
that.
with this 1.3 dot
I
lighting
knew
up
he was gonna ask.
persistently in lots of tests, and it's been hard for you to determine why that's happening.
Sustained.
All right,
Agree to disregard.
let's move on from the 1.3 dot. What's the one to the right of it?
That's called the all but 1.3, and that's used to distinguish if you have a situation where you're trying to distinguish the 1.3, 1.3 homozygote. That's what that dot is for. It's, again, part of the logic.
Right. Now, remember we discussed when we were
Zygote.
discussing
They're from
PCR
Doctor
carryover contamination.
Who.
Yes.
We had those charts out with the little pyramids.
Yes.
All right, and we were discussing the number of those billions of fragments that we called amplicons.
Yes.
And if you recall, we used an example where the starting material contained DNA that was 1.3, 1.3.
Yes.
All right. Now, starting back to that pyramid where you have a sample that has 1.3, 1.3 in it.
Okay.
Billions of little amplicons.
Okay.
Right. What it would do in this particular strip, it would light up that 1.3 dot.
Yes. If they all, now, you got to give me the exact conditions. They're all getting in there?
It's a 1.3, 1.3.
Contaminant?
No. So we'll get to contaminants in a minute. I'm talking about a situation where you have billions of fragments that were just 1.3, 1.3.
Okay.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
I'll pull out the chart.
No, I remember.
Well, I know you remember, but that's not the point.
Your Honor, objection. Can we keep the comments down? Did you instruct Mr. Scheck?
No, we can also keep those comments down, too.
All right. This was the chart we were using to discuss the amplicons, correct?
Ito yells at the prosecution because Scheck is making comments. Of course, that checks out.
Yes.
All right.
This
And
is defense exhibit.
Any
the chart
rum.
number is
Any
1133.
rum?
And on 1133, our hypothetical was we were starting with biological material that contained, for this DQ alpha system, 1.3, 1.3.
Okay.
And we discussed how on just one PCR run, you, in one of those little tubes, you would create 4,290,000,000 fragments of 1.3, 1.3. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
Okay.
But again, I should point out that we're not talking about, in any case, with starting with just one fragment, right? You're saying theoretically you end up with billions of copies.
Right.
I'm comfortable with that, yes.
Now, if we had the scenario we were talking about the other day, sample is a 1.3, 1.3, how would it look on that chart? The one would light up in the far left-hand column, right?
Yes.
All right. And the 1.2, 1.34 dot would light up.
Yes.
The 1.3 dot would light up.
Yes.
But the all but 1.3 dot would not light up.
It should not light up if it's a 1.3, 1.3 homozygous type.
Now, in terms of PCR carryover contamination, if there were a problem of PCR carryover contamination at a laboratory, such that through repetitive typing there was some 1.3 amplicons in the laboratory, are you with me?
Yes.
That could account, in terms of typing, for the 1.3 lighting up persistently in various strips, even if faintly.
Oh, roll.
Well, again, that's why you run all those control strips, because those are all negative. That tells you that you're not seeing this consistent problem.
And that's why you also run quality positive control strips too.
Yes, that's one reason we run that too.
Okay. Now, okay, thank you very much for this. And maybe you could return to the stand and we'll move a little further here. So that's a thumbnail explanation of how to read these DQ alpha strips.
Yes.
Now, we were talking about mixtures and how to interpret them. You recall that?
Yes.
Now,
Were we? Were we talking about
there are
mixtures?
different kinds
Wait,
of mixtures that...
We were talking about cocktails, remember? Why can't they talk about cocktails? Cocktails? Come on.
DNA laboratories
Come
encounter in their
on.
casework.
Yes.
And the one that has been done, which one? A very typical kind of case for a DNA laboratory involves a sexual assault case.
Yes, it does.
And a mixture in a sexual assault case, if let's say there's one perpetrator and one victim, ordinarily involves DNA from the sperm of the perpetrator
Yes.
and DNA from the epithelial cells of the victim.
Yes.
And the epithelial cells, those are like the skin cells?
Yes, those are the, in this case, you'd be talking about the cells that line the vagina.
Right. So what ordinarily happens in a sexual assault case is that a swabbing is taken from the victim of the rape, and on the swab there is evidence of sperm and also cells, epithelial cells from the vaginal wall of the victim.
Yes, that'd be typical.
And that's the typical kind of mixture that forensic DNA laboratories will encounter in such sexual assault cases.
Yes.
And when you're dealing with that kind of a mixture, you can do something that's known as a differential extraction, correct?
Yes.
And that's literally what you can do is you can take the mixture and you can look at it under a microscope.
Yes.
And you can literally see the sperm cells there.
Yes, you can.
And then what you do in the differential extraction is you literally take some kind of a detergent and you pour it over the sample, correct?
Well, you don't just pour it over the sample. It's all done in a test tube.
It's done in a test tube,
Yes.
right? The fancy name for that is a lysis.
Yes, you do a lysis. Uh-huh.
All right. But literally what that means is you first put in a detergent that is not as strong as a second detergent that you're going to put in, correct?
Well, it's a little more involved than that. What it really comes down to
Hold
is
on, hold on. What's the relevance of this?
I'm going to tie this up in just a second.
Quickly.
Quickly. In a differential extraction in a sexual assault case, what you can do is first extract the DNA from the epithelial cells, correct?
yes.
And you do that by literally pouring in this chemical, and that'll burst open the cells, the epithelial cells, and you can drain out the DNA from the victim.
Well, yes. Basically, what you're doing is in this differential extraction process is you're first getting out the DNA from the female contribution from her cells, while the sperm heads, until you add another reagent, the sperm heads, because their DNA is packaged differently, they are resistant to that first lysis that you mentioned. So the DNA stays with the sperm.
So then you can pour in a stronger chemical, and you do a lysis, or you burst open the sperm cells, correct?
Yes. Yes.
And so in that fashion, you can, with some assurance, doesn't always work perfectly, but with some assurance, you can separate the sperm DNA from the epithelial cell DNA from the victim.
Yes, again, it doesn't always work perfectly, but you can get an idea what the mix is that way.
And in that kind of a mixture situation, you can then sort of have a backup, because if you take a blood sample from the victim and you compare it to the reading you get from the epithelial cells, you have sort of a backup check to know that your process is working correctly.
Yes, that serves as a check.
And that is of considerable assistance in interpreting a mixture in a sexual assault case.
Yes, it's helpful.
And it's in some ways analogous to doing DNA testing in a paternity case, where you have backup systems where you know what the the genotypes of the father is, and you know, or the putative fathers, and you know what the genotype of the mother is.
Well, that's...
Let me withdraw that question. Let's just get to the bottom line here. Would you agree that mixtures involving bloodstains from 2 or 3 or 4 contributors, you cannot perform a differential extraction like you can in a sexual assault case?
That's correct.
You cannot put that bloodstain under a microscope the way you can in a sexual assault case and literally see the different kinds of cells that are contributing to that mixture.
That's correct.
If you have a mixture of a bloodstain and saliva together, you cannot look under a microscope to look at that bloodstain and see what cells come from saliva and what cells come from blood.
Well, now
He even dropped the vajayjay word, and I cannot stay focused. I am trying. My mods are distracting me. I'm trying anyway, and I cannot. How far are we? We are 11 and a half minutes away from the end of today.
that's incorrect, because when you're talking about blood against blood, that's true. But saliva, as you mentioned when we were talking about sneezing, has these epithelial cells, and one could look under the microscope and make an extract of a blood stain, just like one would make an extract of a semen stain, and look at the microscopic the features that are there, and you might see that there are epithelial cells that could be attributed to saliva, for example.
Well, have you ever done that?
I think I did that in one case. I don't recall doing that in my DNA work, but I can recall doing some
good
kind of
answer.
micro-exam on.
Good answer.
For example, it's not unusual to look at a blood stain where there may be a blood and semen mix. That's not an unusual.
I'm sorry. Are you finished, Gary?
Don't interrupt.
I didn't mean to interrupt him.
That would not be an unusual occurrence to have a blood-semen mixture, and so one would do a microscopic exam for that purpose.
There's no blood-semen mixture in this case, is there?
I didn't examine any of this evidence for semen.
Right. And in a blood-semen mixture, you're going to see sperm cells, right?
Well, depending on whether or not the person has sperm, I mean, maybe a vasectomized individual, for example.
When you have
Counsel, it's really, let's just go back to the blood mixtures, please.
Well,
We're not dealing with any other mixture here.
that's my point. Hey, did you examine under a microscope the bloodstain mixture to determine whether there was, you could see anything that you would attribute to the epithelial cells of saliva versus cells from bloodstains?
No, I did not do that.
All right. And you're actually saying that's something that you think could be done but wasn't done?
What I'm saying is that someone, if they wanted to, could run that test, yes.
Now, bottom line, would you agree that
as opposed to a sexual assault case where there's a mixture of sperm from one contributor, non-vasectomized individual, and a vaginal swab from one victim, right, as opposed to that situation, interpreting DNA results from blood-stained mixtures where there are more than two contributors, all right, that second situation is a much more challenging application of this technology.
Well, it's more challenging in terms of saying what could go with whom, for example. That's true. Although sometimes even with those types of mixtures on RFLP, you may be able to sort something like that out.
But bottom line, the two or more contributor blood-stained mixture, to use simple terms, is harder in terms of trying to figure out who are the contributors.
I think in general that's true, yes.
Okay. 10:30 is good.
10:30.
I'd like to move to the Bronco board.
Mr. Harris, you want to give Mr. Scheck a hand here?
This is prosecution's 260.
Thank you.
Now, you received swatches from the Bronco numbered 23, 24, 25, 29, 30, 31, and 34, correct?
I believe those numbers are all correct. Some of those, now 23 I don't think we analyzed, for example.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, 24, 25, 29, 30, 31, and 34.
Okay, the numbers you mentioned were 24, 29,
Yeah, I'm really starting from the top down to here to 34, correct?
yes.
All right. And all those samples were collected on June 14th.
Sustained.
Do you know if all those samples, based on the writings that you received, were collected on June 14th?
I don't know that.
All right, I'm going to ask you to assume that all those samples were collected on June
Art
14th.
should
Okay.
invoke feelings of
And
passion. That's
You
art,
received
baby.
another set
That's
of
art.
samples. 303, 304, 305, which were swatches from the console, correct?
Yes.
And those, I'd like you to
Invokes
assume, or do you have
joy.
any notations about when those were collected?
Limitless joy.
It was my understanding that they were collected later. I don't know the exact date.
I'd ask you to assume that those were collected in September,
Okay.
about 2.5 months after the first set of samples that we discussed were collected.
Sustained.
Well, maybe my month estimate is off. I'd ask you to assume that the first set of samples that we discussed up to 34 were collected on June 14th, 1994, and then the second set of samples, 303, 304, 305 from the center of the console, were collected on September 1st, 1994.
Later. At a later date.
Well, I think that August 26th they were first examined. September 1st they were actually swatched
man.
by Mr. Matheson.
Yeah, remember growing up when divorce was almost a bad word? Like it was, women were not allowed to think about divorce. No, 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 no. Bad word.
Either way, August 26th, September 1st,
Later.
later. Now, looking at these samples, I'd like you to assume that number 30, that's labeled to your center console, was collected on June 14th And number 303 was collected at a later date from the same area as 30.
Actually, A is the same area.
Oh, well,
Okay?
the jury's heard the testimony as to how this was recovered.
Are you with me?
Okay, so you're talking about the same general area.
Same area.
Well, now, same to me means the identical spot.
We can only make our assumptions based on testimony from others, okay? I'd like you to assume
Sustained.
same area of the console.
Again, when you say same, how same are they, I guess is what I'm...
Your Honor, maybe I could break and I'll get some pictures. From the same steam.
Objection, that misstates the testimony.
All right, let's take our break now. Let you look at the photographs. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please remember all of my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. Don't form any opinions about the case. Don't conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you. Do not allow anybody to communicate with you with regard to the case. We'll stand in recess for 15 minutes. Mr. Simpson, you can step down. Mr. Scheck, why don't you find that board? All right.
I missed it, Josh, but that would be a first.
To the smear that you see where 30 is in this photograph?
Yes, I see the post-it. It looks like this is 3-0.
Right. So starting to, as I'm looking at it and the jury's looking at it, all right, the upper left hand, from the left going downward to the right, you see that streak? Yeah, where the arrow is pointing, from there down to where the 30 is, all right?
Yes.
All right, let's call that the area of 30, and 303 is being in the same area, okay?
Just, in other words, we're assuming it's right in that same area.
In that same area, okay? And let me direct your attention to 31.
Okay.
Maybe we could have the arrow go there as well. And that area would be starting at the top. It's a little shadowed there, moving vertically down, okay?
Okay.
And let's assume that that 31 area is the same as 304. And now I'd ask to look at another photograph that we'd ask to be marked defendants next in order. There's 1167.
All right, 1167 appears to be a photograph of the console on butcher paper.
Yes. And I'd like to assume that that last photograph I showed you, 1087, was a photograph taken on June 14th.
The one you just showed me before?
Yes, previously.
Okay.
Now, this is a photograph taken on September 1st.
Okay.
And I'd like to, why don't you assume that 306 is just is a hair and is not a stain, okay?
Okay.
And looking at the area, again, 303, you see the same area that we pointed out on the June 14th photograph, starting from the upper left hand, moving to the right, okay?
Objection, that's vague, and misstates the testimony.
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
All right. You see where the 303 label is?
Yes.
All right. I'd like you to look at the area to the left of 303 and assume that is the same area as 30 on the June 14th photograph.
It's vague, it may be inconsistent with the testimony in this case.
Oh,
because it's
I don't think
vague.
so.
Sustained.
All right. You see an area designated 303?
Yes.
All right. You see an area designated 304?
Yes.
All right. Now, okay. And you see an area below designated, the bottom of that designated 305.
Yes.
All right. Guys, cliffhanger. Big cliffhanger. You're never going to know what his next question is till tomorrow. I'm sorry, guys. Look, we're getting there. We're getting there. This is freaking history, all right? This is actual history we're getting through. I'll see you all in a couple hours. I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you, guys. See ya.